Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Life in the Red podcast presented by the Lincoln Journal-Star. Luke Mullin alongside Amie Just. And if you're watching us on the web, you know, we promised last time the video would be coming. You get to see us doing this podcast live. If you're listening on Spotify, you're probably confused. You're like, this is an audio podcast. But here we are.
Both.
Here we are from the Journal-Star studio. So thanks everybody for tuning in. This is episode 2 of our season, you know, covering Husker football, volleyball, anything else that comes up. And today, you know, we're going to be talking football, of course. And, you know, the main conversation is Northwestern, the biggest game on the schedule. We'll break down all 12 opponents, you know, talk through the season, see how, you know, we kind of think it's going to play out. And also, you know, some early observations from practice. You know, obviously we've gotten the chance to have a couple different media availabilities. You got the chance to see a little bit of practice. We'll see a little bit more tomorrow too, from that open session. And to me, you know, the biggest thing that stood out was Frost's comments on Thompson. Obviously, you know, the starting quarterback job, that's always going to be something that people are interested in. And Frosty said it's Thompson's job to lose.
Yeah, and he basically said that, though not as directly during media days. I was in Indy and we were talking quarterbacks, and even then he said that Casey's fully healthy. He's going to get the first reps with the ones. And then last week he said that a lot of the quarterbacks are playing really well right now, but he's pleased with what he's seen from Casey and that we'll keep him working, but right now it's his job to lose, which that's what we all kind of figured, but it's interesting for him to be that direct about that right now. That's just a little unlike him.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've been kind of getting a chance to talk to a lot of the assistant coaches, you know, the position coaches, and you know, you get a little bit more of a sense, obviously, how they see their rooms, but obviously, you know, for the head coach to, you know, pretty directly talk about the starting quarterback job. Here's the full quote in case you're curious. Frost said, "We've got a lot of quarterbacks playing really well right now, but I've been really pleased with what I've seen from Casey. We'll let him keep working, and right now it's his job to lose." So, you know, pretty strong stuff, and obviously, like you said, you know, we're kind of expecting Thompson to be in that role, so just kind of a confirmation of that. But obviously, we haven't had that same level of, you know, security at all the other positions. There's obviously still a lot of things going on. A couple weeks of practice left to do, and it seems like starting running back, you know, obviously there are a lot of guys in the mix that still seems to be up in the air, and wide receiver too. You know, we were talking about there's a lot of different guys. You know, you get the transfers coming in. And so far, you know, I guess the cohesion has been kind of an issue. Mickey Joseph kind of sounded off about that at practice, didn't he?
Yeah, so last week, Mickey was talking about consistency, and one of the reporters asked him who the most consistent person has been, and Mickey said himself. He's looking for a lot more consistency from those guys. He's looking for an alpha in that room. A leader hasn't necessarily stepped up just yet as of last week. And I asked Frost about that, about Mickey's comments on Friday, and Frost said that he's seeing a little bit more consistency out of them now. He didn't go into specifics about specific players per se, but I have to imagine Mickey's comments to the public-facing media lit a fire under some of them, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the kickstart you might need. Obviously, you know, I'm sure he's telling the guys the same stuff in practice, but you know, obviously he gets to assess that group, and I mean, you're thinking about leadership. Obviously, it's a pretty different group from last year. I mean, Omar Manning, he's kind of the senior, but at the same time, I mean, he's not the only guy that has a lot of experience at the college football level. So eventually, I think that guy will come, and you know, Mickey will be able to be at the press conference and say, "I got this dog in the room now. It's not just me."
Yeah, for sure.
And one of the other interesting things that we got to kind of get a little bit more information about, obviously the special teams. I mean, last year was a huge area of concern. Bill Busch, you know, taking that lead role. But it seems like there's a lot of different other coaches, and it's kind of a team effort so far.
Yeah, that's what Bill Busch was talking about last week, in that, you know, he was very high on all of the assistants and said that they're, you know, an important asset to, you know, making this thing work, even though it starts with him, right? He just needs the buy-in from the assistants, and he specifically named Chenander as one of the guys who's helping out with drills. And so I asked Eric about it yesterday, why that's important to him, and he went on talking about how it's important for his guys to see that it's not only, it's important for him too, so it should be important to them. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing we got to hear is, he said too, there's a big difference between, say, a third stringer who doesn't play special teams and a fourth stringer who plays special teams. That's gonna, change a lot over the season. It's a lot of different game experience and chance to get out there, show what you're worth. So obviously for those players, it's a big deal to get that chance. Maybe their position coaches, making sure that they're in the right spot as they see fit. And I guess the only other thing from the last week of practice that we already kind of knew that the defensive line would have good depth. We just got a little bit more insight to how those individual players are working. First chance to really talk to O'Shawn Mathis in kind of that group media setting. And me personally, I guess I was just kind of impressed at how comfortable he seemed with all of it. I mean, obviously, TCU, a big-time college football program, not like he hasn't done any of that in the past, but, he spoke about how he just fit in with his teammates right away, got everybody's phone number, film session, working out together, the type of stuff that you'd really want for that group to come close together. So it seems like Mathis is fitting in there right away. And, some of the other pieces, along the interior, the defensive line, obviously we knew Nash, we knew Ty Robinson, those two guys are there. It seems like UTAN native Colton Feist, he seems to be a pretty popular guy among that coaching staff for what he's doing so far.
Yeah, and it's not just the coaching staff, like every other defensive player that we've spoken to in availability, it feels like they've been, just heaping praise all on Colton, saying that, he's going to contribute. And when you have your teammates saying that, you're standing out in practice.
For sure. And I mean, he got on the field a little bit last year, impressed. And, the kind of thing is, too, then we got to talk to him. And he's very, very kind of humble, very plain and low. He's like, I'm just learning the technique, just getting out there. Well, I think he's probably got some of that technique down.
I think so, too.
And, the other thing, too, you get the transfers coming in. And Alabama transfer Stephen Wynn seems to be a guy that's really working his way up. But kind of the flip side, Husker's still waiting on Texas Tech transfer Devin Drew, the academic transcripts to get those processed and make sure that he's good to go and roll and, finally start some team activities. That process has been going on for a while now. And, Drew, a guy that, the coaching staff was hoping he'd contribute, obviously still can, but, might take a little while to get up to speed with that. So something to watch moving forward. Like I said, we'll get the chance to see a little bit more open practice. We'll have more observations for you in our next pod. But now, let's get to the main bit. Let's talk the schedule. Generally, I think it's kind of sets up in an interesting way. Obviously, the week 0, you get two byes during the season. Might be a little bit of an advantage there, but the November, the backloaded schedule, it really adds something important to these first 3-4 games, doesn't it? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you start off Northwestern, North Dakota, Georgia Southern, Oklahoma. That's your first 4. First 3 are very winnable games. I worry a little bit about the second game, not just because, North Dakota is in a good conference for the FCS, but I'm more worried about if jet lag and how they're responding from that, because I know I'm going to be tired and I'm not doing anything. So I'm worried about that a little bit. But the back end of that schedule, the last 4 or 5 games, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. Woof.
Yeah.
Woof. So you have to start strong because you're going to drop a game
for
or
sure.
2 or more at the end of the season. If you want to be bowl eligible, you have to take care of business early. You just have to. Yeah,
it's definitely not one of those cases where you can hover around 500 and expect to be really competitive there at the end of the year to pick up some games. I mean, it's going to be a real challenge if they're still searching there at the end of the year. So that brings us to kind of the burning question for today. Is this week 0 game against Northwestern the most important one on the schedule?
If they lose it, I think it is.
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's just the kind of thing where, obviously they destroyed Northwestern last year, and, nobody's necessarily saying they need to go out there and, beat them by 7 touchdowns again. But if you do start that season with a loss, it's already one against you in the conference. It's not just some random non-conference game to start off with. And as you mentioned, I mean, the path to bowl eligibility just becomes that much harder. But obviously, if they win, the focus will be on to Oklahoma, which I think is probably what the other people would say is the most important game. For many historical reasons, not just for their bowl eligibility for the season. But I mean, when you look at that Northwestern team, obviously last year was kind of a struggle for them. A lot of different pieces, but they obviously have a decent amount of talent. Pat Fitzgerald, he gets that team competitive a lot of the time. So do you think that they're going to be able to come out there week 0 and be that kind of pesky Northwestern team that we usually see?
I mean, the last time Northwestern was coming off a really bad season, that was 2019. They went 3-9. They rebounded and then some by winning the Big Ten West. So that concerns me a little bit for Nebraska because it shows that Pat Fitzgerald he can get his guys going, and I'm sure Northwestern has a chip on their shoulder from last year. I mean, 56-7 is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, without a doubt. So we'll be interested to see what kind of version of them we get. Amie will be there in Ireland, so safe travels to her and everyone else who will be heading out there. Pretty unforgettable trip. And after that, it's a long stretch there at Memorial Stadium. Huskers not going on the road for a while. They'll be here. They'll be at home. And starting off the non-conference slate, it'll be North Dakota. Went 5-6 in the FCS Missouri Valley Conference, strong conference as you mentioned last year. And it's kind of, in my eyes, it's kind of a litmus test. It's like Northwestern, obviously conference opponent. You expect that to be relatively close, a team that's played Nebraska close. But, you get to North Dakota, FCS, lots of really good teams at that FCS level. It's not always going to be a cakewalk, but really, I mean, if we're talking second quarter, third quarter, and things aren't really kicked into gear, it's going to be a real concern, I think, to that coaching staff if the team isn't ready to pick up and hit the ground running there. Yeah,
it's Nebraska, to my knowledge, has never lost to an FCS opponent. Pretty sure. So that would be embarrassing.
Yep.
What would be doubly embarrassing is forking over, $515K for a team to come beat you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it matches up well for Nebraska. I mean, their defense, North Dakota's defense, is relatively undersized and inexperienced, and that'll help the offense, I think. Take advantage of some of those mismatches. But we'll see.
Yeah. And the thing for North Dakota, it seems like they have a lot of starters back on offense, but the defense seems to be kind of the issue for them. So that'll be really interesting to see. Some of these games, can the offense just get up early, run them, beat them down, or will it be kind of a little bit more of a struggle, slogging through that game? And pretty similar, type of situation, but obviously Sun Belt opponent the week after that, Georgia Southern. And an even bigger amount of money that they paid to get him here.
Yeah, that one's $1.4 million. And I am honestly less worried for Nebraska against Georgia Southern as I am against North Dakota. At least North Dakota's coach has been there for several seasons. I think 9. Bubba's been there. So Georgia Southern, Clay Helton is trying to revamp a pretty rough team that he inherited, and there's going to be a lot of growing pains. I mean, there's a new offensive scheme, a new quarterback, new coaches all across the board. It's I would expect if things go as they should, Nebraska's backups will get considerable playing time in that one.
Definitely, yeah. That's the kind of game you're looking for. That obviously a week before the Oklahoma game, make sure everybody comes through that healthy and everything. And in terms of the national view, Lindy's, one of those top college football magazines, has Georgia Southern 120 out of 131 among the FBS schools. So kind of, trying to build that back up, as you said. So that'll be the foe, getting Nebraska ready for arguably, one of the biggest games Memorial Stadium has hosted in a few years. Obviously, I think the atmosphere for College Game Day when Ohio State came to town was phenomenal, kind of that big game atmosphere that you're looking to. But 3-0 Nebraska, if they can make it there, make it through those games. Oklahoma, obviously preseason top 10 team. It will be electric to welcome that Big 12 foe back into Memorial.
Yeah. Hopefully Oklahoma can get everything under control by then.
Sure.
Don't really want to talk about it, but it's been kind of wild down there in Norman the last couple of days. But that's more than a month away.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll get all of that figured out. But yeah, granted, this team's supposed to be really good. But it's also a little bit of a different team since Lincoln Riley's not there anymore. You have Brent Venables there. But they'll get all of their rust and, communication issues out during their non-conference early slate too, I think.
Yeah.
So it should be good. I mean, both of these teams are poised to be undefeated going into this one, so it should be fun.
Definitely. And I mean, I thought Venables, he was one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, obviously, there at Clemson. And, it's going to be different, obviously, Nebraska, not a conference opponent for them, but, a different Big 12. Yeah. It's going to be a different style of offense, that he'll have to defend against. And you get Dylan Gabriel coming in, guy who had a lot of success there at Central Florida, one of the top passers in the country. So I think he'll be a great fit for that Oklahoma team. He'll be able to put up some points for them. But we'll be interested to see how competitive is it going to be, because even these marquee games last year, Nebraska's so close in so many of them. Got the stat, Nebraska 0-13 against ranked opponents under Scott Frost. And a win here, I mean, it would stand out above every other win as just the best he accomplished so far.
Yeah, the last time Oklahoma came to Memorial Stadium, 2009, Nebraska won.
Yeah.
So stranger things have happened.
Definitely. And after that, I mean, it'll be a little bit of a challenge, I think, to bring that same enthusiasm against Indiana.
It's homecoming and it's a night game, so that helps a little.
There's actually quite a bit of history, not recent history, but they have played quite a few games against Indiana in the past, and this is going to be a big one too, because Indiana kind of crashed and burned last year. I mean, they were.
It's being nice.
Yeah, they completely fell short of every expectation that they had. So Paul Allen, getting this program back up, making sure that they're kind of at that, bowl eligible status. It's going to be a big game for them to come here. Is Nebraska going to be able to put another team away? Because this is the stretch, as we mentioned, that they need to be picking up these wins. They need to be beating these teams. And so I guess just what do you think Indiana is going to be much improved from last year, or will it kind of be a challenge to get back to the heights they were 2 years ago?
I mean, it can't get much worse, right? I mean, they went over in Big 12 play last year, and the expectations for them preseason are still low. They were picked to finish dead last in the East, so that's not great. I mean, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, tons of transfers, especially a receiver.
Yeah.
They've got a new defensive coordinator. It's just, there's a lot going on there. But you can't get much worse. So, but again, you never know. Nebraska sometimes surprises you in the wrong ways.
For sure.
And when you're coming off of a game like Oklahoma, you don't want the next one to feel like a trap game, or the one before.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it'll depend on the season record at that point, but I mean, speaking far out now, you'd expect Nebraska's going to be a pretty decent favorite in that game. So are they going to be able to, win it by as much as they should, take care of business, limit mistakes that you want to see in those kind of games? And after that, week sixth game of the year.
Road game.
Finally, a true road game, a Big Ten opponent on the road, and it's Rutgers for a sleepy Friday night game. I mean, we'll see. I don't want to, throw too much shade. We'll see how, the town can turn out for that Friday night game. But you get the sense. Usually those Friday night games are a little bit less attended regardless. I mean.
Unless it's Black Friday.
Yeah. So, Rutgers kind of in that middle spot. I mean, 5-8 last year, 2-7 in the Big Ten though. Obviously, tough division competing in the East. They get pretty much half their starters back. So there's room to improve. Obviously, Greg Schiano, he's back there for a second stint, and he had a lot of success with Rutgers in the past, but still kind of trying to work their way up. You do get the sense, at least I think I do, with this game that if there's ever a trap game, I feel like it's that one.
Like it's this one. Yeah, it's. But Rutgers is going to have to come prepared. I mean, their scoring offense last year was abysmal. It was like 19.7 points per game, which is like among the worst in all of FBS last year, not just Power 5. and they have a very transfer-heavy offensive line, and that, to me, like, your offensive line is one of the most important things for your offense, and they've got a ton of transfers on it, and if they don't jive, it could be a very long day for Rutgers, especially against Nebraska's defensive line and their edge rushers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And after that, back-to-back road
Another
games,
road
no
game.
less. So they're finally there. They are on the schedule. Nebraska goes to Purdue. Obviously, you know, the Big Ten West opponent. They've had some real ups and downs against Purdue. You know, the loss in 2019 was just a heartbreaking one. Purdue drove down and won that with about a minute left. Really hurt the team's bowl chances. And again in 2021, another tough loss that really hurt them in the bowl. Beat them in 2020 at home. So be interesting to see how they do. They're on the road. Different offense, a lot different offense. You know, we've gotten used to these guys, you know, Rondale Moore, David Bell, you know, these real stars there at Purdue. Well, you know, they're kind of gone. You know, they've reloaded. They've got some different guys. Iowa wideout Tyrone Tracy, he'll be in the mix this year. But this Purdue team, you know, 9-4, 6-3 Big Ten last year. They seem to always kind of pick up a lot of wins here and there, and Nebraska might be a game that they're looking to pick up there, especially at home.
Yeah, and if you look at Purdue last season, I think they're a case study in what Nebraska could have been. Because going into the game against Nebraska, Purdue was 4-3. They win, and then they go to 9-4. So it shows how one thing going your way, you can really build on that. I'm a little worried about Purdue's wideouts, right? Because you don't, like you said, you don't have David Bell, and then the guy who was supposed to like take over that, right? Milton, right? Academically ineligible. There's a lot of inexperience there, and I think the secondary needs to take advantage if they want to win.
Yeah. So a few question marks there. Obviously, Aiden O'Connell, he had a pretty good season a year ago. You know, expect to be one of those veteran Big Ten quarterbacks. So should be able to keep him pretty competitive.
Oh,
obviously,
for sure.
Obviously, the ceiling will depend on the wideouts. So that'll be kind of the question. And you know, now we're getting Game 8, Illinois. And if we're talking about big games, I mean, this is going to be a huge one because looking at the way that, you know, the season's going to shake out, Nebraska very well could be 5-2, 4-3, desperately needing a win to get to bowl eligibility in this one.
And you can't lose 3 in a row to Illinois.
Yeah.
You can't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that would make history in all of the wrong ways. And I don't think that that's going to happen again. But then again, I didn't think they would lose the season opener to them last year either. So, yeah, their defense is supposed to be really good again. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. And a lot of that success hinges on their quarterback, Tommy DeVito. He played really well at Syracuse all the way back in 2019, feels like a million years ago, but he hasn't started since. So will he be able to play like he did, or will he be a little bit rusty? We'll find out.
Yeah, and I mean, Brett Bielema, you know, taking over this Illinois program, obviously had a ton of success with Wisconsin here in the Big Ten West. And I mean, if you're Nebraska, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, losing 3 in a row would be really hard to stomach. What would be even harder is if you get the sense that Illinois is kind of climbing up, you know, the Big Ten rankings ahead of them. You know, they're building something better there. So that'll be I think a really big one. You know, it is possible if a lot of these other games, you know, go the right way. They could have clinched bowl eligibility already. You know, could be 6-1. You never know how that's going to shake out. But I think definitely that Week 8 game is pretty likely to be what could bring them to 6 wins or maybe even to 5 with ahead of that tough November slate.
Yeah, just it feels like a must win because after that it gets pretty dicey.
Yeah, and right ahead you go into Minnesota, and for me I guess this is kind of like a measuring stick game in a sense because Minnesota, they get out-recruited by Nebraska every year, but yet when it comes time to play on the field, Minnesota seems to be a lot more disciplined, make a lot fewer mistakes, and come away with the win more often than not. Obviously, bowl eligibility might be on the line here again, or just, you know, make sure that you're competitive in the Big Ten West ahead of pretty big game coming up there against Wisconsin, also the Big Ten West in 2 weeks' time. But that Minnesota team, Mohamed Ibrahim, he's still there. One of these guys where you're like, man, he's been in college for like a decade.
It feels like it. And with the COVID, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of veteran guys on that Minnesota team, but at the same time, a lot of question marks still in the air.
Yeah.
Obviously, Game 9 we'll have a lot better sense after 2/3 of the season go by. But I mean that's going to be a tough one. Minnesota always plays tough.
Yeah. One of those question marks is offensive line. Of course, it's like what, Game 9 at that point,
Yeah.
so they'll figure it out. But they do replace 4 of their 5 starters, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, or not hopefully for Nebraska fans, they'll figure it out by then.
Yeah. And talking about replacing starters, after that it's off for probably the biggest road game of the year. Definitely, you get a big time college football environment up there, Ann Arbor, playing the Wolverines, a team that returns a lot on offense, but barely anything on defense. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, a lot of those stars from last year are gone. The guys who helped lead Michigan, deep in the season. 12-2, 8-1 in the Big Ten. They were a really, really tough team down the stretch. And is that defense, going to come along? Are the players going to step up and, fill those voids? I think obviously we expect the offense should be pretty decent again, but in the Big Ten, you're going to need defense to win these games in November for sure.
Yeah, they only returned 1 starter on the defensive line, and the depth there is lacking. But again, the game's in November, so things will be a little more pieced together then. But that's definitely an area of concern for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a kind of interesting one too, because obviously we had Jim Harbaugh flirting with the NFL all off season, only to come back. And it seems like their 2023 recruiting class might be feeling the effects of that a little bit. So going to be an interesting year for Michigan too. Are they going to be able to keep some of that same level of success, or will it be kind of an uphill battle to get back? We'll see what happens for the Wolverines. But after that, final 2 games of the year, Big Ten West opponents, really doesn't get any much bigger than this, other than that Oklahoma game early in the year. Wisconsin coming to town, a team that has produced some tough moments for Husker fans. I think it's obviously just the downhill running, and it just seems like every year there just gets to a point in the game where they're going to run the ball, and they just run it all the way down the field for another touchdown, put the game out of reach. It's happened quite a lot. The Badgers currently have an 8-game winning streak over Nebraska. A matchup that seemed kind of promising early in the Big Ten days has soured there for Nebraska.
Hasn't shaped up to be the rivalry that they want.
Yep. And kind of the interesting thing in the West here is I guess Wisconsin is the favorite kind of by default. They've been the most consistent program. They have a lot of a few guys coming back on offense, but the defense seems to be a little barren. So who knows? Could be a big game for the West. Those standings, whether it's Wisconsin or Nebraska, who can be at that top. But Wisconsin, kind of that top opponent in the West again.
Yeah, even though the cupboard is a little bare, so to speak, they're still primed to take the West this season. It's been a while since they've made it to the Big Ten title game, but I don't know if this could be the year for them finally breaking through what feels like a drought for them, which is funny to say it's a drought, right? Because they've just been so successful. But you got to get there, the Big Ten title game, which Nebraska has a lot of work before they can
definitely
get to that point. We're just talking about getting eligible for a bowl.
Absolutely. And of course, it's a major hypothetical to think that they could be competing for a Big Ten West, but it's within the realm of possibilities. If everything goes right, that game could be a big one. But obviously, Week 12, exactly who you're looking to on the schedule there, Iowa. It'll be another road game going to Iowa City, and talking about Wisconsin, well, the rivalry against Iowa has been very, very one-sided as well.
Yes.
And this Iowa team, not ranked to begin the year, but we've seen this a lot. We've seen Iowa be that team. They're always sitting there at 8-3 or whatever it is. By the time you get there, they win. They win a lot of games that they need to win. They're competitive, against some of those top tier opponents. And like I said, always show up for this game against Nebraska. The thing that stands out to me, 8 starters back on offense, 8 starters back on defense as well. Maybe not those like all Big Ten guys, the guys that just pop off the page, but you need a lot of these consistent, reliable guys. Spencer Petras, the quarterback, is one of them that they're going to need to step up.
And Jack Campbell is a menace. But yeah, it's been 7 losses in a row, and the last 4 have been within a touchdown. Like, that stings even more.
Yep.
Maybe this is the year, but we've got a lot of football to go before we can see for certain
Absolutely.
if that's the case.
A lot of game-winning field goals too. As like time expires, especially for a team like Nebraska that's had some struggles in the kicking game. I mean, that's an extra punch in the gut right there for those games against their rival. So I guess that's just kind of how we see the schedule right now. We'll get deeper in the year. We'll have the chance to see how these teams fare. Obviously, their early season contests. Chance to actually see these players in action versus just seeing the roster, seeing the depth charts, how they break down. So, we'll be interested to see how maybe the regular season progresses in a way that we thought it wouldn't. Maybe one of these teams is gonna blow our expectations out of the water. We'll just have to wait and see. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context for how the schedule will break down. Obviously, like we said, early season, super important. You can look forward to that November as some great opponents, some great challenges, but really got to take care of business early on.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I think that'll just about do it here for episode 2 of Life in the Red. We'll be back at you next week, talking even more practice observations, getting the chance probably to dig into that Northwestern matchup a little bit more, scout it out a little bit. We'll talk to you, see what we're looking forward to there in Ireland, maybe any tourist destinations,
Of course.
Let Amie know where she needs to go. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Life in the Red podcast by Lincoln Journal-Star.